Returning home from a demanding shift, Nikolay was in good spirits. For the next 3 months, he wouldn't be obligated to any alarm clocks, grueling labor, or chilly weather. He was ready to spend time with his family and excited about the gifts he had for them. While contemplating the reunion, he visualized a table filled with delicacies. Taking a brief moment, he closed his eyes, almost tasting the food. Upon opening his eyes, he noticed an unusual sight on the road. Reacting immediately, he slammed the brakes. The abrupt halt jarred him awake as the seatbelt pressed against his chest. He watched in astonishment the spectacle before him. A young bear had ambushed a fawn. It wasn't clear what the bear's intentions were, given that both animals were almost the same size. Regardless, the predator kept tumbling the terrified creature on the asphalt. Unsuccessful in its attempts, the cub gnawed at the back of the fawn and swatted it with its paws. The bear seemed puzzled about landing a final blow. Upon noticing the car, both animals became distressed. Nikolay brought his car to a halt a few meters away from the tangled creatures and blew the horn. The sudden noise startled them. The cub looked at the car, growled out of fear, and quickly dashed towards the dense forest. After a moment, nothing remained of the bear cub except rustling leaves. The fawn attempted to rise but fell back onto the hard road surface as its legs gave way. It stared in fright at Nikolay. What would you do in Nikolay's place? Would you approach the injured fawn or leave it in the wild? If you're drawn to these captivating stories, make sure to support us by hitting the like button, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you won't miss what happens next. Nikolay contemplated his next steps. The straightforward route would have been to drive around the fawn and continue home, later recounting the incident to his kids as an adventurous encounter. However, he thought about the aftermath of leaving the creatures behind. The fawn was helpless on the road, an easy target for waiting predators who could finish the bear cub's unfinished task. If not predators, the fear, thirst, hunger, or harsh sun could end the fawn's life. It was evident that the fawn was unlikely to survive more than a few days. Realizing the critical condition of the fawn, Nikolay knew moving it to the grass wouldn't change its fate, as it was incapable of feeding itself. Resolving to help the creature, he got out of the car, scanning his surroundings for the fawn's mother. However, the nearby forest was unusually quiet. Nikolay sighed deeply, realizing he had to take the fawn home. He moved his car close to the fallen creature. The fawn quivered in unease as Nikolay scooped it up in his arms. "Don't fret," he sought to comfort the baby deer. Yet his human tone only added to the creature's anxiety, forcing him into respectful silence. He settled the fawn in the backseat of his vehicle and resumed his trek. Eager excitement filled the yard as the family heard the car pull in. The kids bounced with hopeful anticipation of surprise gifts. However, Kolya had a different sort of surprise in store. Their astonishment held them still as he extracted a live fawn from the car. "Dad, I asked for a plush toy, not a real one," his daughter remarked, taken aback. They made space for the young deer in the empty pen within the barn. The cow seemed wary of the wild newcomer, but made no move to harm it. Kolya stumbled upon a bottle with a nipple meant for calves feeding. The baby deer twitched anxiously at the sight of people, but it responded positively to Kolya's arrival with the bottle filled with milk. The savory aroma of sustenance pushed the famished creature's fear aside. It swiftly understood the purpose of the nipple and drained the bottle. The barn was left to the companionship of the cow and the fawn for the night. Kolya wasn't privy to their interaction, but the following morning a change was evident. The fawn no longer trembled at Kolya's presence. Instead, it reached out independently for the milk bottle. After its meal, it tentatively explored its surroundings. The little creature showed signs of recovery after resting and gathering energy. It stood on wobbly legs, carefully adjusting its posture and balance. The expansive backyard, enclosed by a fence, offered a possible path to escape, yet the fawn showed no desire to cross its threshold. Initially, it stayed close to the safety of the barn. Gradually, its curiosity led it to venture into the backyard, but it was cautious about approaching the main house. A formidable alibi dog chained near the doorstep glared at the uninvited newcomer. A single warning bark from the dog swiftly dismissed any thoughts the baby deer had of getting closer. Kolya patiently bottle-fed the fawn, gradually introducing leafy greens and vegetables into its diet. He would venture out daily, gathering fresh foliage and grass to mimic the deer's natural food intake. At first, the young deer seemed perplexed by the variety it was offered. It tossed around the greenery, trampled over it, or lounged on the comfortable spread. All the while, the cow in the next pen observed with longing. It stretched to reach the greens the fawn played with, munching on the fallen leaves. This piqued the interest of the young deer. Now the trough contents nudged closer to its peer, peering curiously as it ate. The cow's contentment enticed the fawn to take a hesitant nibble. Initially, it kept to meager portions, but soon grew fond of the new feed. Kolya now found himself making several trips to the forest daily. One day, Kolya subconsciously picked up a bag for leaf collection and exited his property through a rear gate. This shortcut led not to the main road, but directly into the forest, significantly shortening his journey. Without thinking, he secured the gate behind him as he proceeded along the path. Soon after, an unusual wheezing sound became audible from behind him. Startled, Nikolay spun around. The gate wasn't fully shut. The fawn, noticing the absence of its caretaker, had followed him. Nikolay tried to coax the creature back into the yard, but the fawn skillfully sidestepped his gestures and continued to follow him. The fawn had no interest in passively waiting for dusk alone in the yard, where the cow's eventual return would provide some company. But alone during midday, idleness set in, and boredom was inescapable. The fawn seized this opportunity for a leisurely excursion, devotedly staying within a safe distance. The surroundings captivated the little one's attention as it munched on bushes and tree twigs. Kolya couldn't think of heading home until several hours later, when the young one had its fill in a wholesome wandering. Such outings became regular after that. The fawn was growing swiftly, both in width and height. In 2 months, it ballooned to a size where Kolya couldn't hoist it into his vehicle solo. Consequently, Kolya started gradually switching the creature's diet to vegetarian, only occasionally giving it milk. During those instances, the fawn would excitedly rush toward its caretaker and nudge him with its growing antlered head. To avoid injury, Kolya celebrated the reduction of the milk feed. The fawn was now bolder. During their jaunts, they would independently amble between trees while Kolya engaged in other chores. Nonetheless, the fawn's existence was mostly confined to domestic conditions. It had only become acquainted with the wilderness during these shared outings, wherein Kolya meticulously monitored its every reaction. The man was caught in a quandary, uncertain whether to maintain the status quo or to backtrack in search of the fawn. Just then, the dog gave a loud bark, signaling unanticipated visitors. Kolya's attention shifted for a couple of hours, and then he strolled into the yard in the evening, only to find the fawn nonchalantly sauntering toward the house. Overwhelmed with delight, Kolya exhaled in relief as a healthy and lively fawn managed to navigate the entire day without supervision. He embraced the doe tenderly and served up a pail of grain. The following day, Kolya escorted the creature to the outskirts of the woods. The deer then continued its journey alone. For several consecutive mornings, it would depart at dawn and return at sunset. But then, it didn't come back, and Kolya grew restless. His wife tried to soothe him, suggesting, indulge in some calm offerings. It might have reunited with its herd or simply chosen to spend its nocturnal hours in the woods. It's a wild creature. The woods are its natural habitat. Kolya nodded in agreement, even allowing his wife to tuck him into bed. However, sleep eluded him throughout the night as worry consumed him and disturbing images invaded his mind. When daybreak arrived, Kolya was gripped by unease. A grim acceptance started to dawn on Kolya that the likelihood of the deer relocating was minimal, yet a spark of hope remained. Kolya frowned at his phone. His wife usually rang at a time suitable for them to converse, but today she was late. Unease gnawed at him, and he called her. Hearing a downtrodden voice on the other end of the line, Kolya's worry spiked. "What's wrong? Is something amiss with the kids, you or Lil Buddy?" "No, we're all okay," came the hurried response. "But remember Nikolay, who lives past the school? He arranged a hunting expedition with some friends. Posing with their posh firearms and fresh camouflage attire, they followed Nikolay into the bush, aiming for a wild boar, but encountered a moose instead. Nikolay was aware that moose frequently strayed nearby, but couldn't alert his friends. The outsiders gunned down the beast with 3 shots. Now they're celebrating their victory. Meanwhile, Nikolay rushed to me and spilled out the whole story. Beyond this point, Kolya stopped assimilating what he was being told. It was unthinkable that the deer could meet such a senseless end at the hands of strangers. The entire neighborhood was aware of the creature. Even kids would dash over just to marvel at it. Hunters admired it too, stating how fine the creature would become. Kolya had pleaded with everyone not to discharge any firearms near the neighborhood, and they agreed. They didn't even have a penchant for hunting moose. One aimed for birds, another for fur-clad animals, while Nikolay set his sights on hares and boars. Kolya had been at peace until that fateful day. The unsuspecting man failed to anticipate trouble from an unforeseen direction. Kolya returned to his outpost and hurriedly assembled his stuff. "Hey, where are you headed?" "There's only 2 days left in our shift," his companion expressed amazement. "I have to return home. It's an emergency." Evidently, Kolya's facial expression conveyed his desperation, so his fellow officers didn't protest. His comrade even assured him he would vouch for him if needed. Besides, a replacement crew was expected the following day, meaning his friend wouldn't be alone for too long. Rapidly, Nikolay packed his belongings in the vehicle and drove hastily toward home. He knew that upon his arrival, there would likely be no moose or hunters remaining. But that didn't prevent his non-stop journey. He drove incessantly, halting seldom for momentary breaks. Upon reaching home, he was welcomed, not by smiles nor an extravagant feast. "That's not him, Dad," his child objected instantly. "I assure you, it's not our moose. I sneaked out to see their catch. It was much larger than our own." "Sonny hasn't visited our place for over a month," Kolya's spouse crooned melancholically. "He might have matured over that period," she suggested. "No, it isn't him." The young one didn't waver. His faith bolstered optimism in Kolya's heart. He hurriedly filled his backpack and trailed off into the wilderness. Throughout daylight hours, he searched across all known haunts he frequented with the moose, yet was unable to trace the creature. Kolya thought the animal might not have lurked around the homestead unseen, typically spending nights in the forest and proceeding onward as day breaks. Occasionally, Kolya called out his pet's name, yearning for a response, but mile after mile his interaction was limited to squirrels. On one hand, it was beneficial since his echoing calls deterred other creatures. Simultaneously, Kolya worried if the moose had forsaken him, choosing to evade the noise. After day 2 ended without a favorable outcome, Kolya decided to scout one more day. If he underperformed, he would resign and return home. His family hadn't indulged in his return before he darted off into the woods. His ocean of responsibilities toward his family piled up. With a saddened heart, he bunked for the night until a rumbling sound interrupted his slumber. Something massive was approaching, snapping twigs in its path. The disturbed man panicked. Nikolay often narrated tales of rampant boar packs residing deep within the woods. They could frighten anyone with their rampaging trails, carrying out a jamboree that not even an armed tracker could thwart. Startled, Kolya ditched his belongings and hastily found refuge in a tree. He hoped that being high up and scared would not make him the object of attraction to anyone. However, instead of boars emerging from the site of his camp, a giant moose appeared. It took a cautious look around, then slowly advanced toward the backpack, dipping its snout inside. It was highly unlikely for a wild creature, one that had never encountered a human, to act with such audacity. There could be only one plausible reason. "Moose?" The animal lifted its head and saw the man. Immediately, the moose produced a friendly bellow and jumped up and down, just like it used to when it was little. Kolya descended from the tree, feeling a wave of elation. The moose didn't seem perturbed by its considerable growth over the last 3 months. It pranced around and nuzzled against him like a young fawn, causing an overjoyed Kolya to lose his balance. The man enveloped his cherished companion in a big hug, stroking its fur softly. When his excitement finally subsided, he set off to return home. The moose followed suit. Trekking together proved to be much more entertaining. Kolya didn't even realize when he arrived near his residence. His entire family came out to welcome the travelers. In their happiness, they fed the moose some oats from their kitchen. A creature of habit, the moose preferred to stay in the barn overnight rather than in the forest. However, the family cow was frightened by its presence, so the moose ended up spending the night in the middle of the yard. Kolya left the gate open, ensuring the moose could depart at any time. By morning, the creature had already left. Nonetheless, it returned every couple of days for a visit. Soon, the harsh winter descended, causing food scarcity in the forest. Many wild animals like rabbits, foxes, and even wild boar made their way into the village in search of food. The moose managed to hold on until the end, nourishing itself on bark and seeking moss beneath barren snow. Following a large snowfall, the moose began to feel pangs of hunger. Kolya decided to construct a feeder for the moose in the forest near his home. He even put a roof on it to protect it from the snow. He filled it with hay and occasionally added some oats. A large salt lick was also hung nearby. The moose was grateful for the assistance, nuzzling against Kolya in a gesture of gratitude. Over time, Kolya noticed other animals from the forest frequenting his feeder. Once or twice, Kolya saw an antelope from a distance. The following year, he decided to gather more hay and grains, hoping it might save another life. On the morning of his birthday, he was awakened by a tapping on his window. To his surprise, as he pulled the curtain apart, he saw the figure of the moose amidst the white field of snow behind his house. Overwhelmed with emotion, his eyes filled with tears. A perceptive creature presented a powerful present to his rescuer. It arrived of its own accord, a living, breathing surprise. Kolya stepped out, wrapping his arms tightly around the unexpected visitor. A wave of emotions welled up within him, causing his eyes to mist. Shaking his head and brushing away a single tear, he came back to reality, the echoes of memories swirling in his mind. After a few precise minutes of realignment, Kolya recovered. Those visions from his past were so tangible that he found it hard to believe they were just images from a dream. 15 long years had passed since Losik, a timid deer, first entered his life. By now, Losik had matured and grown impressively large. His visits were frequent in winter, with 1 or 2 surprise appearances during summer. Over time, Losik aged, just as any creature would, something Kolya understood, finding similarities in his own life. He was not growing any younger, but his feelings for his animal friend grew fonder, and his concern more profound. Kolya had ceased working long ago, and unforeseen health issues had left him reliant on crutches for mobility. Yet, unfailingly, with each new day, Kolya would shuffle to the yard, peering at the distance to catch a glimpse of Losik. Today was special. It was Kolya's birthday. A gathering of family and friends was expected for a memorable occasion. Yet Kolya eagerly awaited the arrival of a special guest. Leaning on his crutches, he slowly began his journey toward the flora, carrying a bucket full of oats. Regardless of whether Losik turned up today, the feeder needed filling. Emptying the oats into the feeder, the crackling sound of branches breaking in the distance caught Kolya's attention. In quiet anticipation, he rested on the edge of the feeder. To his joy, a magnificent creature soon emerged from the depths of the forest. With the innocence of bygone days, the deer edged closer, gently rubbing its nose against Kolya's face. Kolya curled his arms around Losik's thick neck. Unaware of the passage of time, he finally let go when the deer started to paw at the ground uneasily. Losik promptly went over to the feeder, crunching on the oats as Kolya watched, patting the animal gently before heading back home. The sight that greeted him as he turned back was an empty clearing. "Grateful for your remembrance," he whispered under his breath. A comforting feeling washed over Kolya as he ambled his way back home. A warm smile etched on his face. Now it was time to engage in the birthday festivities. His most cherished gift had already been received, a faithful companion found at an unsuspecting roadside years ago.